Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this newest edition of Museum Expert webinars. We are at a very unusual hour for these webinars, and you will understand that very easily because we are live with our colleagues in Ukraine. And if I'm not wrong, it's like 6 p.m. In Ukraine right now at the end of their working day. So we really thank our colleagues in advance here for taking the time at this late time in the day to joining us for this conversation. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us. This is how it's going to work. We will have a conversation with our colleagues led by Linda Norris, and I will come back to that in a second. During this session, feel free to write in the chat, introduce yourself and say who you are and why you're here. Also, if you have questions or remarks coming up during the conversation, put them in the chat. Colleen Carter, who is like behind the other screen there, our organizer, will look at the chat, and at the end of the conversation, if we have time, and hopefully we have, we will be able to address some of these questions. So museumexpert.org is not necessarily an expert in the broad field of museums activity in Ukraine. And so when we came up with that idea, I checked with a number of colleagues of how we could get to people who are really working in Ukraine as professionals to have their voices heard. And I came then to meet with Linda Norris, who has quite some experience in the field. She has been working for over 10 years, maybe close to 15 in Ukraine, starting as a Fulbright scholar in 2009 in Ukraine, and later on working with the multinational team of ICOM to address building resilience with professionals in Ukrainian museums. And so she has maintained contact a lot with the field over there. And actually, she is the Senior Specialist Methodology and Practice at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. And she will say a word about that as well, I'm sure. And you will find in the chat all the links that will be of interest to you that will be coming up in this conversation. So Linda, thanks for moderating this in our name. I'm looking forward to your expertise into that. And then two of our speakers that are two speakers, Olha Honchar, and she is an anti-crisis manager and director of the Memorial Museum of Totalitarian Societies in Lviv. I think I'm saying it well. Thank you for being here. I know you're sitting outside there in a magnificent environment. And then we have Anna Pohribna. I hope I say it right. She's the Deputy Director of Programs at the Arsenal National Art and Culture Museum Complex in Kyiv. I'm going to leave it here because Linda is much more qualified than me to get the conversation started. Thanks all again for being part of this, and I will come back at the end and say the necessary closing remarks at that point. Thank you so much. Linda,
thank you so much, Walter. It's great to be here. It's an honor always for me to share the work of Ukrainian colleagues. There's, since the full-scale war started last February, it's been really important to share kind of the incredible work that colleagues all over Ukraine are doing. I'm honored once again to do it. I've actually visited both of their museums, which is a really nice thing, and I look forward to the days I can come back again. So I thought we might start before this full-scale war. And as a reminder, the war started in 2014, but until last February, and I think I'll start with you. Tell us about what your job was at Arsenal before the war, what Arsenal is as an organization, and what you specifically were doing.
Hello, thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. and for this opportunity to meet you and share our experience and our stories. So yes, I will start from a short intro about Mistecki Arsenal or Art Arsenal where I work. So Art Arsenal is a Ukrainian public multidisciplinary institution from Kyiv. Actually, it is located in the very heart of Kyiv in a huge building of the 18th century. It was an armory facility built as a part of Kyiv fortress during the Russian Empire time. And as a cultural institution, Art Arsenal was founded almost 20 years ago, so it's quite a young institution. And we can consider Art Arsenal like as a symbol of the post-colonial transformation of the country. I mean, from the military facility built in the times of the Russian Empire to the cultural institution founded in the independent Ukraine. And now it's one of the Ukraine's largest cultural space. The total space of our galleries is about 60,000 square meters, but we can use only part of the building because our building is still in the process of restoration, and we can't use it at all, but actually it's a quite huge building of historical and architectural importance. And before the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, our team had been working on a spatial development project, which presumed the opening of the new contemporary art museum and a permanent exhibition of our collection in a couple of years. But obviously, a full-scale war forced us to postpone this renovation. And now we are still operating in this building, which is in the process of restoration. And if we are talking about Art Arsenal programs, I have to say that it's not like a classic museum. Yeah, it's not a museum like itself. It's a multidisciplinary center, which includes, of course, museum programs, and we have a museum collection, which is like core of our program activities. But also our programs include contemporary art and book and literature, some performing art elements, and of course museum collection. And obviously our museum collection and our building are most endangered today. And if we are talking about our collection, there is avant-garde art, contemporary art, and archaeology from the location where Art Arsenal is built. And in recent years, our exhibition projects have focused on the history of contemporary Ukrainian art and also on the exploring of some cultural phenomena and historical periods on the cultural heritage, mostly Ukrainian, but not only. And we used to implement 3 or 4 exhibitions and also 2 festivals each year. And what was happening at Arsenal on the eve of the invasion? First of all, we just closed the exhibition Futuromarine. It was a very huge exhibition of Ukrainian futurism and avant-garde. We prepared this project for 3 years and involved partners from 15 museums and archives from all regions of Ukraine. And at the beginning of 2022, we debated whether to continue this exhibition for a couple of months because the exhibition was really loved by audience, so there were a lot of visitors, and we were thinking about to stay this exhibition open for a couple of months. But at the same time, we saw that the threats were obvious, so we dismantled the exhibition and returned all the artworks at the beginning of February. And also, secondly, we were preparing the next projects for the spring and summer, because usually, as I told before, we have 2 festivals, and one of them is the International Book Arsenal Festival, and it takes place every May or June. And it was intended that Book Arsenal Festival was also it was intended to be implemented last year, but unfortunately it was not possible. And also we were working on the research project dedicated to the rethinking of our collection. And we also planned to continue this research into the exhibition and also to the digital platform. But yeah, unfortunately, all these plans were not possible after the February. And the last thing what we did, we put much effort into the securing of the collection and preparing some internal protocols for our staff. Because yes, we got prepared. We developed an action plan of the case of emergency. We couldn't even imagine what emergency would be like. Yes, but we understood that we had to protect our collection and the historical building, and also we have to take care about our team. And we decided to allow people to care for their safety, and we develop a guidance for a very minimal number of team members who needed to arrive at Arsenal in case of emergency. And this allowed us to be a bit prepared, but of course no one was prepared to this full-scale invasion. Yeah, but the most significant part of Art Arsenal collection was evacuated in the first days of the full-scale invasions. Yes, but I think I will tell you more about our activities here after the invasion a bit later. And now
Great. And
give you a
Olha,
word.
before I move to you, I probably should, for those of you who don't know Ukraine, and I see some people in the room do actually know Ukraine pretty well. Kyiv is the capital. It's been under significant threat. Olha is in Lviv, which is in the far western part, which has been under less of a threat. Is that fair to say, Olha? Many internally displaced people have come to Lviv. So they're different cities. Neither of them are in the east. And I think we'll come back to talk about museums in the east a little bit more as well. But Olha, talk about your museum and your work before the war.
Yes, hello, dear colleagues. Hello, Linda. Hello, colleagues, and thank you invite me to be with you. Linda says that it will be meeting with only 3-5 people, but now we see a lot of colleagues from all over the world, and yes, it's very important for Ukrainian museum workers to be a part of international community in this horrible time. So about my museum. My museum is Memorial Museum of Totalitarian Regime Territory of Terror located in Lviv, and we focus on Nazi regime and communist regime after Second World, because Lviv, it was the center of Holocaust in Ukraine and center of communist regime and terror. So now for Lviv is very important to understanding this part of history of Ukraine. And before the 24th of February, we work like normal museum. We have permanent exhibition. We have oral history archive. We creating new interview with the people who was repressed by communist regime and people who was deported from Lviv and Lviv region. And we have a lot of project with media to share this part of history of Ukraine. We creating books, and also we very active and have cooperation with contemporary Ukrainian artists because we work like museum with the conception. The museum is platform from dialogue and platform for discussion this hard history for Ukraine. Yes, and one part of museum work is before 24 February. It's the be in contact with the colleagues from Donetsk region, from Lugansk region, and we have expedition to this region to research how the war in Ukraine present in local museum exhibition, because, as you know, war in Ukraine started in 2014, and this region was once under attack first. So from the 2014, I'm with this region first, like in June, my first work, and when I start to be a director of museum last 6 years, I'm also in contact with this region. So when 24 February start, I'm also was in contact with my colleagues in Lugansk region, in Donetsk region, especially in Starobilsk, and I remember this day, 24 February, first what we do. We call to colleagues from Starobilsk, Lugansk region, and invite them to evacuate it to Lviv. And also we start to all emergency work, like museum, to save all work that we do in museum territory of terror. And I think it will be the next questions what we do. Yes, because we have a lot of case, and yes, Kiev was under attack first, and colleagues in Kiev don't have a lot of time to do this emergency work, and we in Lviv have more time to packet exposition, conservation exposition, and download materials, and so on and so on. And it's also why we do a lot of job to helping people from another region, because in Lviv we have more time, and we feeling like more safe. Of course, after 1 year of war, we understand that it's not true, but of course, Lviv, it's more safe place if this safe place we can have in Ukraine.
Great. And so that is a great next question. I'll remind everybody, if you have questions as we go along, please put them in the chat and we'll come back to them. Olha, talk about Museum Crisis Center as your next step, because that happened very quickly after the invasion started. Yeah. So talk about that, and then Anna, I'll come to you.
Yes, thank you. So 24 February, all museum team territory of terror was in do first emergency work. We packet exposition and download the most important files online, because the permanent collection is archive of interview with people. Yes, with its oral history archive is, and it was very important to download all and have this copy of museum territory of terror. And we all we have, I think, 1 week to do this work to museum territory of terror. But of course, from the first day of war, a lot of colleagues outside of Ukraine, sometimes I not know these colleagues before 24 February, find me and call me. I think it was because I have this time to have conversation of telephone, of emails, because in general, people and museum workers from Kiev, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, Dnipro-Lugansk region don't have time to have this conversation, and ask me, Ola, we know that you have this contact with museum in the East, so we want to help this museum. Please help this museum colleagues from another region. And I understand that I think that I maybe I'm in Lviv, yes, and I have this networking. So I write a post in Facebook. It was 3 March 1 year ago, and I asked my reflection to my colleagues, to my partners. So how we can help people who stay in Ukraine with their museum to continue work. So maybe we have some Ukrainian foundation and so on and so on. And a lot of my colleagues from another project, not only from Museum Territory of Terror, write me, so Ola, we think that we don't have time to wait for this foundation, and we don't have this foundation. So we think that we together can start some project initiative to helping museum workers, and so you have this networking. And it was 3 March 2022, and we create Museum Crisis Center. And from this day to now, we continue and work like project which organize and helping for museum colleagues in all Ukrainian region. Now it's 10 region, more than 130 museum. And we fundraising and sharing and I think 5 million hryvnias for Ukrainian museum workers who stay in Ukraine and continue work. You're mute. You're mute.
Of course, I'm muted. I'm sorry. I know part of your work has been outward facing, having other people know more about Ukrainian art. I know you've just done a traveling exhibition, and can you talk a little bit about your work around letting other people know outside of Ukraine about Ukrainian art, and as that relates to decolonization and the kind of work that lots of people inside and outside Ukraine are kind of working on? Can you kind of talk about the specific work you're doing, but also reflect on that in a broader way?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, our work from the first days of invasion was mainly focused on telling the stories abroad, using our professional network. Mainly, it was connected not so with the museum professional community, but more with the literary and book community, because one of our biggest project is the Book Arsenal Festival, has a lot of international partners, and we really relied on this network of international partners to share the news about events in Ukraine, and to share some stories, and to ask people, for example, to be critical or to cancel Russia authors or some participants in a huge book events or in professional networks. So from the first days of the full-scale invasion, our work was focused on this international communication, yes, but then in a couple of months we moved to a more usual for us professional museum work, and we received offer to cooperate from the Kumu Art Museum in Estonia, and so we started to work on the first our self-sufficient exhibition of Art Arsenal abroad, and it was, as I told, invitation from the Kumu Art Museum in Tallinn, because before the invasion, Kumu director visited the Futuromarine exhibition in Kyiv, and then after the beginning of the full-scale war, she offered us to adapt the project for Kumu. And it was a huge gesture of solidarity from Estonian colleagues, because they wanted to tell their audiences about the culture of Ukraine. And at the same time, it was the opportunity for us to protect our heritage, because when we exhibit some very important artworks abroad, it is also a way to protect them from the possible destruction here in Ukraine. Yes, and Linda, you asked me about this decolonial optics, yes, and this project was also a good chance to use this decolonial optics, because avant-garde is very often associated with Russian avant-garde abroad, and it was a good chance to talk about avant-garde in Ukraine as a very self-sufficient phenomena, which of course was somehow connected with Russian Empire, because these artists developed in the same time, and very often like we're close to some artists, but it's very self-sufficient phenomena, and it was really very important for us to tell the story. And I don't know if now is if I have 4 minutes to tell more about this exhibition, or maybe it will be like a next question, but I can use this case of Pohribna in Tallinn to tell you more about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so I will start about this preparation process, because it was very unique experience for us, because like we felt a very deep empathy and a very deep understanding of the culture of Ukraine, as a part of Europe, from our Estonian colleagues. And we felt a lot of trust in our work, because we felt that our partner trusted us not only as curators who developed a concept and choose artworks, but also we felt this trust in Arsenal as a team, because we were responsible for a large part of management, and also for graphic design and communications and educational program. And for Kumu, it was the first experience when the visual style and graphic design were done by an external designer, so from our part. And from the other hand, they were always ready to advise from their experience and from the experience of their audiences. And of course, we cooperated with many Ukrainian institutions. In the exhibition in Kyiv, we involved more than 15 partners. Here in Tallinn, it was possible to involve only works from 4 Ukrainian museums, and also some objects from the film archive and photo archive. But we are very proud of the cooperation of this Ukrainian museum, who feel this courage to contribute to the exhibition. It includes 106 regional artworks, and also many historical photos, videos, and some site-specific installations. It is not only about this historical period of Ukraine avant-garde, but it's also very much about our present context. I have to say that the exhibition in Tallinn is quite small, if we compare it to exhibition in Kyiv, because if in Kyiv it was 4,000 square meters, in Tallinn it's only 200, but it's very informative, and we like it very much. This scale changes were not only because of the space or some time limits, but it was also because some of works that were presented in Kyiv belongs to the collections of museums that survived the occupation or continue to work under the constant shelling. And for example, due to this reason, museums from Kharkiv could not provide the artworks, or for example, partner of Kyiv project, Kherson Museum of Local Law, was completely looted during the occupation by Russia. But also, what is more important, we changed the conceptual framework. And if we are talking about this decolonization, it was important for us to tell the story that Russia continues these attacks on culture for hundreds of years. And for example, in 1920s, there was appropriation of artistic heritage, and then in 1930s, a lot of creators were repressed. And now we see this looting of museums in the occupied territories and destruction of monuments. So we have this slightly different focus, with a special emphasis on this self-sufficiency of the Ukrainian version of futurism, because as I told before, there were artists which worked in a common cultural space with Russians, but at the same time, they were like primarily connected with Ukraine. And there were not epigons, but rather leaders of new ideas that were spread across Europe at the time. And for us, it was very important to talk this story, which was not only about art, it was about Ukraine in general, about heritage, about identity. And it was a story from the first person. And at the same time, this story has not yet become a past. And we're really very grateful to our Estonian colleagues who were ready to hear the story and to help to share it, and for their empathy and their willingness to cooperate, and also to make this exhibition very accessible, not only for the Estonian audience, but also, for example, to the audience of Ukrainian refugees in Estonia, because this exhibition is also very important about among Ukrainians in Tallinn. And the museum invited two students from the Art Academy in Tallinn, and they organize some guided tours in Ukrainian. So it's also for us, it was we did not predict this way of life of this exhibition, but it's really nice that it is close to different audiences.
That's terrific. So Olha, a question for you that Walter asked me just before we started. I find it amazing. I have seen, Facebook posts of Ukrainian museums. The Honenko Museum in Kyiv does a program in their courtyard the day after their windows are blown out. The Literature Museum in Kharkiv does, programs in their basement during an air raid. Why do museums matter now to Ukrainians? And do you think they matter more now than before the full-scale invasion? Why are people still going to museums?
I think now also we unfortunately have a lot of information that a lot of museum was destroyed by Russia bombs, and this information in media in Ukrainian and not only Ukrainian, and people saw the museum, and it's very important to see museum which not now destroyed now in Ukraine, because we also don't know if the next day we can lost museum. Yes, also in Lviv we don't have believes that museum territory of terror survived to the end of the war. So unfortunately, it's reality and for every museum in Ukraine. And I think it's also it's why people go into museum. It's the first. It's about it's about this potential of lost museum, and the next is. Because people want to understand history, maybe more than before 24 February, because history of Ukraine is very dramatic, and a lot of Ukraine people now asking themselves why this war started and why Russia attacked Ukraine. And maybe one way when they can find this information, it's also museum. And for museum territory of terror, we also have in Lviv a lot of people who was moved from all Ukraine to Lviv, and when people come to museum territory of terror and see this part of history, history like from totalitarian regime perspective, people say that for them it's sometimes new information, and sometimes it's information for reflection of situation of now, and sometimes it's catharsis, like people say it, because people are understanding that every war end, and we survive, and Ukrainian history and history of Ukrainian people and every generation, they have this fighting with Russian, and it was very hard for Ukraine, but we save country and we save culture and we save language. And also Museum Territory of Terror is about this dialogue with the generation, when you can come to museum and listen your grandmother, grandfather, and have maybe some experience how to stay human in the war condition. So I think it's why people come into museum now, to find this maybe true, maybe sometimes hope, and maybe sometimes connection with the history and reflection of identity, because Russia destroying all, and unfortunately we don't know how many museums survive uh, uh, and stay in Ukraine. And it's also why now we have this digitalization, a lot of project of digitalization, yes, and Mistecki Arsenal have digital strategy, Museum Territory of Terror have digital copy, and every museum in Ukraine now try to scanning everything that they can and downloading online, because maybe it's one of the way to save museum for the future, and have this material for reconstruction if your museum destroyed. And I'm also see the questions in the chat about new interview. Yes, in Museum Territory of Terror we start new project named Wounded Culture, and in this project we recording museum workers who share experience how to be museum workers in the war condition, and especially when Russia attacked you. So we have first 5 interviews destroyed by in the March 2022, and now we have 5 short interview in YouTube. I sent you links with English language subtitles, so you can read. And also we have this short version interview for YouTube and big interview for Museum Territory of Terror Archive. And we also continue on this project and documentation work, but from perspective how to be museum workers, because now in Ukraine we have a lot of project of documentation from filmmakers, from journalists, from a lot of, but we focused on museum.
Great. And Anna, for you, I see how many people come out to events at Arsenal, and I believe I saw President Zelensky at Book Arsenal, which might be the only cultural event he's gone to in the last year. Why do you think people are still going to museums? Why do museums matter to people now?
Yes, thank you, Linda. So I think that this need to go to museum has been changing during the year, and we saw it like when we try to keep in mind needs of our audience and society in general, because as a public institution we have to always keep in mind these needs, and to build our program according to this vibe of society needs. So I can say that after the first months of the full-scale war, we saw this need to return to our public activities, and to resume some program activities for visitors, because we saw this need of people just to be together, to come to some safe space, to see other people, to share some stories, to share this experience of the first months of full-scale invasion. And for example, our first exhibition that was opened in June last year It was called an exhibition about our fields, and it's very like this title is really describes this exhibition very well, because our feelings and our experience of the spring of 2022 was in focus in this exhibition. For example, there among some contemporary artworks, there were videos made by our colleagues where they share their experience, and also we invited visitors to share their experience, for example, to leave some story, to write it on a piece of paper, or to record a short video, or to reflect something by drawing or collage. So last summer it was a very basic need to be together, yeah, and to share some stories and experience, and to feel that these safe places exist, and museum is one of such a place. But during the second half of the last year, it became clear that there is also one more important thing, and it's about our ability to reflect on reality, and to come up with some ideas or some visions, some interpretations. And it's very difficult to do it in a situation of a very extreme stress. But we think that art gives this opportunity to people to reflect and to see this horizon in the time when we were limited by a constant stress. So that's why our next exhibition were more like conceptual. So we not only shared some stories or created a platform for this sharing, but we tried to find some points that help us to reflect the reality we are dealing with as a community and as a single person, and also to expand this horizon. For example, our exhibition in autumn, it was called Head of Earth, and it was a contemporary art exhibition that presented artworks from 2014. And the exhibition was about this triangle Earth, person, and food, and refers both to the history of Ukraine, but also to the contemporary experience and to the place of Ukraine in the global world, because it turns out that Ukrainian food is important for the global food security. Yeah, so it was a bit more conceptual exhibition that gave this opportunity to reflect and on the past, present, and somehow trying to see the future. Yes, and I have to say that now we work only with contemporary art, because obviously we cannot work with the works from our collection or from the collections to the other museum. For us, it's a very usual experience, because as a multifunctional institution, we always work also with contemporary art. But for the many Ukrainian museums, now it is a challenge to work with other art, and to involve contemporary artists. But many of them show very great example of cooperation and very interesting and brave projects and exhibitions. Yes, so now we see also this need to people to come to the physical space of Art Arsenal, to meet each other. For example, our Book Arsenal Festival was mostly about this informal meetings and communications. But I have to say that the events was also were also very popular and visited very well. And there were 20,008 visitors during 4 days. So it's quite a huge number of people. and it proves that events like Bukasnal Festival or like every exhibition in museum now is a great emotional and intellectual resource for our society and for its resilience.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to make sure we have time for questions because we have some really interesting ones. So I'm going to ask each of you, starting with Olha, to tell us one thing that people in this call, people who care about museums but live outside of Ukraine, one thing they can do to support Ukrainian museums. Olha, what's one thing that people can do?
Outside or inside? I'm sorry, it's hard
So for
to
people who
one
are outside of Ukraine, what can we do to support you? To support Ukrainian museums?
I think sharing information about destroying of Ukrainian museum, because now we see that unfortunately it's not popular information for news in general. In general, we see information about frontline, and a lot of international community don't know how much museum was destroyed by Russia and how much artifacts stolen by Russia. So I think it's important to know this information and share in your networking and in all information channels.
Great. Anna, what is one thing people can do?
Yeah, I think that I can just support Olga because it's very important to follow events in Ukraine, like to be empathetic, to loudly talk about Russia as a terrorist state and about crimes in Ukraine. But also, I want to add that it's very important to be interested in Ukraine, its culture and its history. And because now there are a lot of materials in English, some different translations or video courses, and it can be like a huge resource to explore, to understand better Ukrainian partners, and then to start some cooperation projects with them. Or just, for example, we have virtual tours of all our exhibitions with our audio guides in English or with some text in English. We have a collection of bilingual publications, so there are really a lot of resources about Ukrainian culture, and yeah, it can be explored. And one other small thing I thought about some tiny gestures that help Ukrainians to share their stories. For example, a partner of our book festival, Frankfurt Book Festival, twice gave my colleagues their Instagram account to share Ukrainian content on behalf of the Frankfurt Book Fair. So it was it's called Instagram Takeover. So it's a very tiny symbolic gestures, but it's also a platform for Ukrainian creators that continue to work in unthinkable conditions to help to connect with other audiences and to share their stories from the first person.
Oh, what a great practical suggestion. Thank you both for those. If either of you have particular sources you follow in social media or websites you'd encourage people to go to keep learning, if you want to put them in the chat, that would be great. So I'm going to try and get to a couple questions. Here's one from Alexander, which is about what is Ukraine and the broader cultural community doing right now to document those thefts and destruction? And I know there's a Blue Shield Ukraine and things like that. Olha, can you answer a little more specifically about efforts to document the documentation efforts about objects that have been stolen or destroyed?
Now I know we have a lot of project of documentation, some from Blue Sheet, some from UNESCO, and some from Ukrainian side, like colleagues from Museum of Revolution, like штаб порятунку культурної спадщини, please help me to translate Anya Budlatska. Yeah. Okay, I
have to
sent you
Google.
link.
Yes.
Yes, I sent you link of this initiative, and also we like Museum Crisis Center organizes project Funded Culture and created interview with museum workers about how to be museum workers when Russia invade Ukraine, and we also doing VR documentation. It's look like. For example, like Ohtyrka Museum, when we was in this museum, we using VR technology and documentation all destroying of this museum. And now we have video. Yes, thank you, Anna. And now we have a video when you can using VR glass and moving to destroying Ohtyrka Museum and come with director of museum Ludmila Mishchenko and talk about this museum. So we also do this work of documentation of destroying of culture, and for example, very active in this field, Kherson Art Museum, because this museum was stolen by Russia, and they also start a big job and cooperating with lawyers, and they start to fighting to back their collection. And also we have very active Lugansk regional museum, which was evacuated to Lviv, to my museum Territory of Terror. They also following their museum in occupied territory and very active in forum, in conference, in media, and talk about this. So Ukraine, very big country, and we have more than 2,000 museums. So we need a lot of organization and a lot of initiative of documentation all and sharing information. And it's as for me, it's very important that we do this work on government level and NGO level and activist level and museum level. And for Ukraine is very typical situation when we have a lot of active actors and a lot of level of doing this job. And but of course we don't know all masштаб of destroying museum. We have this statistic from a website of Minister of Culture, but unfortunately every day we have more and more destruction. And when I talk why it's very important to sharing information about culture destruction, it's because now we see genocide of Ukrainian nation, people, and culture is one of the part of this process. And for every Ukrainian people, it's important to talk about this war like about genocide. And culture under attack and people of culture under attack. We unfortunately have the story when territory was occupied and Ukrainian writers, Ukrainian literature, Ukrainian culture activists was killed by Russia terrorists, because these people was culture people who make sense, make vision, make conception. And it's very important to sharing this perspective of this war. It's not only war about resource, about field, about politics. It's war and and Ukrainian culture under attack.
So before I hand it back to Walter, I'm trying to be really mindful of time. So to end, and Anna, I'll start with you. What gives you hope right now?
I think that Ukrainian society, yeah, my community, my colleagues, my family, people with whom I interact every day, people whom I don't know, but I follow the stories, soldiers on the front line. So people give me this hope for
Thank
the
you.
future.
Olha, how about you? What gives you hope?
I wanted to see a victory of Ukraine and how to reboarding my country after the all destruction. And I believe in that Ukraine have great future, and maybe this, but of course my friend who continue and work with me, and my friend who continue and work with all like volunteers, like soldiers, like diplomats, and so on and so on, and every day, step by step, do this routine work for Ukrainian victory.
Great. Walter, I'm going to hand it back to you. But before I do, Anna and Olha, as always, it's an honor to be able to share the work of Ukrainians, and we stand ready to be helpful in any way we can. Walter, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Linda, for this very rich, amazingly rich first-hand testimony about what's going on in Ukraine. And I really want to thank our speakers here, our panelists today, to have coming forward and being so clear and about what's going on and what their hopes are for the future. So thank you so much. Colleen, is there maybe one question that we have missed in the chat that you think is important?
You know, Walter, Linda was on it. She did my job for me, so I have no complaints. I'm just sitting back here and enjoying.
Okay, thank you. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Thanks to the museum expert members and contacts and people who have been joining today. This has been recorded, and we will send out the link to our mailing list, of course. Just one more thing before we leave. On August 30th, this summer, we will have a large European session about the European museums' reaction to the COVID crisis, what they have been gone through, how they have responded to it, what the new challenges are that they have, and see what they think the future should be different for museums because of that crisis there. So looking forward to promote that in the coming weeks and having a large audience to watch that European session as well. Thanks again, Colleen, for supporting. Thanks, Linda, for being a fantastic moderator. And thanks to our speaker for these amazing testimonies. And I see you next time. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.